What a crazy trade deadline it was today in the NHL. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about every single team that's made a substantial trade in the last 7 days. So not just the trade deadline, but we're going to go back to March 1st. I'm going to be giving each team an overall grade for all their trades that they made in the last week. So all the ins and all the outs are going to be listed. So as you can see here, to start off with, we have the Anaheim Ducks, and they have a couple players they brought in, a player that they sent out, and I have an overall grade right there at the bottom. So as you can see here for the Anaheim Ducks, they brought in Herman Traff, Oliver Shillington, a second round pick, and they sent out Brian Dumoulin, and they retained 50%. And overall, I gave them a C+. If you wanted to give the Anaheim Ducks a B-, for example, I think that it's totally understandable because they got a second round pick back. I do think that they could have gotten a little bit more. I don't know how good of a prospect Herman Traff is, but yeah, so I gave him a C+, but if you want to give them a B-, for example, I totally understand it. So next up, we have the Boston Bruins, and yes, there's a lot going on the screen right now, just bear with me. So the players and assets they brought in Casey Mittelstadt, Fraser Minton, Henry Jokiharju, Jacob Loko, Herman Traff, Max Wanner, William Zellers, Marat Kuznetsov, Daniil Misiul, I don't know. A 2026 first round pick from Toronto, a 2027 second round pick from Florida that can be upgraded to a first round pick, a 2025 second round pick from St. Louis, a 2025 second round pick from Carolina, a 2026 sixth round pick that was originally their own. They got it back. Now the players that they're sending out their captain Brad Marchand, 50% retained, Brandon Carlo, 15% retained, Charlie Coyle, Trent Frederick, 50% retained, Justin Brazeau, Peter Hauser, Max Jones, Mark McLaughlin, a 2026 fourth round pick from Edmonton, and a 2026 fifth round pick of their own. Wow, so a lot going on here with the Boston Bruins. Now overall, I gave them an A+ because they committed to the rebuild. They know that this year they're probably not going to make the playoffs. They have so many injuries on the back end. Charlie McAvoy's out, Hampus Lindholm's out, and David Pastrnak is pretty much on an island by himself. You still have Swayman, but yeah, they knew they have so many UFAs coming up. There's an opportunity here with a seller's market to get rid of all these players and get so much back for them. I gave them an A+. Like, yes, it does suck that you're sending away Brad Marchand. Like, he's been here for God knows how long at this point, right? He's the captain. He's really like a Boston Bruin personified, right? Like, he is the gold standard when it comes to setting the standard, the Boston Bruins standard. That's what Brad Marchand brings. And yes, you're sending him to Florida, but you're actually hoping for Florida success, Bruins fans, because that second round pick, it upgrades to a first round pick. I believe if Brad Marchand plays in 25% of the first two rounds for the Florida Panthers. It's a weird condition. The reason why I have it as first/second is because I believe that's the only second round pick that can actually be upgraded to a first round pick. I believe every other condition is like it slides to the next year, it's protected, something like that. But yeah, you get rid of Brandon Carlo, someone who's also been here for a minute now. Charlie Coyle, a very useful player. Trent Frederick, Justin Brazeau goes to Minnesota. Yes, you lose a lot, but look at the amount of stuff you get back. You get a very good prospect in Fraser Minton, who's projecting to be an NHLer. You know Casey Mittelstadt can play in your top six. And the rest of the guys are kind of projects, kind of players that are thrown in just to make the trade work. But you get a first round pick, potentially two first round picks, two second round picks, a sixth round pick, and again with that first/second, you could argue it's 3 second round picks, most likely going to be a first round pick. So yes, I give Boston an A+ overall. Just fantastic asset management by the Boston Bruins ownership group. So next up is Buffalo, and I have really no idea what Buffalo is doing. They send out Dylan Cousins, who yes, they've been looking to get rid of for a while. He's been rumored in Elias Pettersson trades, but he gets traded for Josh Norris here, and I put Norris and Cousins like neck and neck here. I don't really see the difference between the two. I mean, maybe Norris is more responsible defensively, and Cousins is a little bit more offensively gifted, but yeah, it's a weird trade. You're taking a lot of cap here with Josh Norris. You're adding Brandstrom and Bernard Docker, a couple of defensemen there. a 4th-round pick, but heading out, you're sending Dylan Cousins, Gilbert Dennis, Nicholas Obey-Kubel, Henry Yokiharu, and a 2nd-round pick. So Buffalo was really buying at the deadline here, and I don't think they bought well. So that's why I gave them a C. Like, I don't think this really improves them in any way, shape, or form. And you're sending out a 2nd-round pick on top of other assets too. So yeah, Buffalo, don't know what you're doing. So you get a C. Okay, next up we have the Carolina Hurricanes. Now I know you see the grading on your screen. Don't flip out, Hurricanes fans. I gave them a C because of the overall outcome of the trade deadline. If you look at it from the perspective of, yes, we have an expiring unrestricted free agent who we know we're not going to be able to re-sign. We send him away. We get Logan Stankoven, who is a fantastic up-and-coming NHL player. You get 2 first-round picks, 2 third-round picks, and you would say that's a fantastic haul for a guy you're not going to be keeping. So yes, I'd probably give you an A+ for that trade. However, the Carolina Hurricanes need to win now. And you send away Marty Necas, you send away Jack Drury, you send away, I believe it was a 2nd-round pick as well to Colorado. You're sending away all these assets, you get Mikko Rantanen, then you recruit the assets that you lost, and then you do nothing with it. And then Eric Tulsky, the GM, comes out afterwards and says, yeah, the Rantanen trade, because it was taking so long, we weren't able to do trades afterwards because we didn't have the cap. Like, it was just a mess from the Carolina Hurricanes. You did so well to maximize your return for Mikko Rantanen, but then you do nothing with it, and it's so unfortunate for Hurricanes fans. But moving forward, I guess in the future, if you want to look at it from a next year standpoint and moving forward, I mean, you have Stankoven, who's going to be an excellent player. You don't have to worry about him. You're getting 2 first-round picks that you can flip for assets later down the line. But I do give the Hurricanes a C overall because they were unable to use the assets they got for Mikko Rantanen to further improve their team for this season. Next up, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they made one trade. They traded a 4th-round pick for Luke Kunin. That's pretty much it. But in all seriousness, I give them a C+ because you get an NHL player for a 4th-round pick. You can't really go wrong there. Next up, we have the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, I don't know if you noticed, I put an asterisk in the date because most of these were taken from March 2nd, which was a Sunday, through March 7th, the trade deadline day today on Friday. But some trades happened literally the day before, so I wanted to include those as well. So as you can see here, like, it was the Seth Jones trade that happened last Saturday on March 1st. Chicago brings in Spencer Knight, Joe Veleno, Shea Weber's contract, Aku Ratu, Victor Soderstrom, and a 2026 first-round pick from Florida. Going out, they send out Seth Jones at 26% retained. They send out Peter Mrazek, Craig Smith, a 4th-round pick, and a 5th-round pick that they both owned. So overall, I gave Chicago an A-. Now, why did I do that? The reason why is because they did not trade Ryan Donato. Ryan Donato is someone who you could have easily got a 2nd, maybe even a 2nd and a 4th, a 2nd and a prospect, you know. That's kind of the market that was out there today for the trade deadline. I mean, you'll see later, there was a trade with the Washington Capitals that I still can't believe that happened. But I think you could have got something for Ryan Donato. That's why I gave them an A-, because they didn't get that trade done. And I think it was reported that they wanted more, actually, which I'm like, I mean, I think you take a 2nd-round pick for Ryan Donato, who's an expiring UFA. But nonetheless, very good week for the Chicago Blackhawks. You get a 1st-round pick and Spencer Knight for Seth Jones, who clearly didn't want to be there. So honestly, if you want to give it an A or an A+, I hear it. Next up, we have the Colorado Avalanche. Now, again, like the Boston Bruins, there's a lot going on here, so we're just going to go through it step by step. So the assets they brought in. They brought in Brock Nelson, 50% retained, Charlie Coyle, William Dufour, Ryan Lindgren, 50% retained, Eric Johnson, Jimmy Vesey, Hank Kempf, and a 5th-round pick from the Boston Bruins. Now, the players that they're sending out, Casey Mittelstadt, William Zellers, Callum Ritchie, Oliver Shillington, Calvin DeHaan, Juuso Parssinen, Giovanni Smith, a 2026 first-round pick, a 2025 second-round pick that belongs to the New York Rangers, a 2025 second-round pick that belongs to the Carolina Hurricanes that they got in the Mikko Rantanen trade, a 2028 third-round pick that's their own, and a 2025 4th-round pick that is also their own. So, I gave Colorado a B+. Now, why? look at everything that they gave up. A first round pick, 2 second round picks, a third round pick, a fourth round pick, Casey Middlestad, a top 6 forward, Callum Ritchie, a top 30 prospect in this league. But the players they brought in for all that, I just don't think lived up to the value that they sent out. You get Brock Nelson, who, yes, can play center. He's someone who can score goals. I get all that. You bring in Charlie Coyle, another center. You bring in Ryan Lindgren, 50% retained, and Eric Johnson, 2 defensemen. I get all that. You bring in needs. That's why I gave them a B+, but I could not justify giving them a higher grade because they gave up all of those assets, and really Brock Nelson is the leader of that class. On top of the fact that not just those draft picks, you give up Callum Ritchie, which is still unbelievable to me. And yes, this further grows my frustration for the Vancouver Canucks not trading Brock Besser away, because Brock Nelson got the New York Islanders a first round pick and Callum Ritchie. So next up we have the Dallas Stars. Now I gave Dallas an A+ for 2 reasons. One, they traded for one of the best wingers in the NHL in Mikko Rantanen. And 2, they re-signed him 8 years, $12 million per season when he was looking for something like 13.5 million. I'm sure he would have got that on the open market, but you got him to settle for 12, which is absolutely insane. They give up Logan Stankoven, 2 first-round picks and 2 third-round picks. It is a lot, but again, you get one of the best players in the NHL, and Dallas, you have one of the most disgusting top 9s I've ever seen. Next up, we have the Detroit Red Wings. Now, Detroit, I gave a D because they bring in Peter Mrazek, they bring in Craig Smith, they retain half of Yanni Gourde's contract, they get a 4th-round pick for doing so, and they send out Joe Veleno and Kyle O'Coin. Just a whole bunch of nothing from the Detroit Red Wings, if we're being honest. I don't know what Steve Yzerman's doing. I'm sure his job is going to be in question very, very soon. But yeah, this was just a bunch of nothing from the Detroit Red Wings, and you take on Peter Mrazek again. You take on Craig Smith, and you get rid of Joe Veleno, who, you know, is at least a center, right? Craig Smith, I don't think is a center. I think he's a winger. And Joe Veleno, I mean, I don't know. If he was providing nothing for Detroit, then sure. But yeah, just a D. I don't know what Detroit was doing, honestly. Next up, we have the Edmonton Oilers. Now, I can already see it. I saw it from the tier list video I made before. Everybody was dunking on me for saying, oh, the Oilers, they're actually really good. You're clowning on their defense for no reason. And then now you see how the Oilers are doing, and it makes sense why I didn't think the Oilers stacked up against a lot of the other top teams in the league because of their defense and goaltending. I was not confident in them, and, you know, here we are. But nonetheless, I was actually undecided. I was between a B and a B+ for the Oilers and their moves. So they bring in Jake Wallman, Trent Frederick, who only makes $575,000 against the salary cap, Max Jones, and Peter Hauser. Going out the door, you have Shane Lachance, Max Wanner, Carl Berglund, a 2026 first-round pick, a 2025 second-round pick that belongs to St. Louis, and a 2026 4th-round pick. I started there, but yes. So the reason why I gave them a B is because I don't think the Oilers got what they were necessarily looking for or the best fit. Now, Jake Wallman, he shoots left. I'm sure he can play on the right side, but I thought the Oilers need a right shot defenseman. And Jake Wallman, yes, he's a good defenseman. And you look at their left side now, you have Mattias Ekholm when he's healthy. You have Jake Wallman. You have Darnell Nurse now, who probably moves down. But you look at the right side, and it's like Evan Bouchard, Ty Emberson, and like Troy Stetcher, right? So there's a big discrepancy between the left and the right side, which is why I thought the Oilers were gonna go for a right shot defenseman. But Jake Wallman is still a pretty good pickup. That's why I gave it a B. Now, the reason why I was leaning B+ is because you get Trent Frederick, who is just a pain to play against. He's a big center. He gives you some size. He's someone the Oilers absolutely need, and he's only making $575,000 against the cap. Like, that's an absolutely fantastic contract for the Edmonton Oilers, and you only give up a first-round pick and a second-round pick. So, yeah, you know, if you want to give it a B+, A-, you know, that's up to you, but I'm going to stick to probably a B+ for the Edmonton Oilers. Next up, we have the Florida Panthers, and this one is going to be pretty quick. I gave them an A+. They get Seth Jones, 26% retained, probably giving them the best blue line in the Eastern Conference. You get Brad Marchand at the end of the trade deadline, 50% retained for a second round pick. That's probably going to be a first round pick. You get Vitek Vanacek, you get Nico Sturm, Capo Kakinen, you get a fourth round pick from Chicago, a seventh round pick from San Jose. On the way out, however, you do give up Anton Lundell, who was someone who you can bank on being their center for probably the next 10 years, right? Him on the second line with Alexander Barkov on the first line was kind of the future, but Florida is all in now. They give up Spencer Knight as well to get Seth Jones. They give up Chris Driedger, Patrick Gile. Again, they give up a first round pick to the Chicago Blackhawks, and then they give up a second round pick to the Boston Bruins that can become a first round pick, as well as their own 2026 fourth round pick. Now, you could argue that you can give Florida an A because they don't have Brad Marchand re-signed, but if we're being totally honest, we're going to see a line in the NHL playoffs, Brad Marchand on the left, Sam Bennett down the middle, and Matthew Tkachuk on the right. Like, I was talking about Trent Frederic being a pain to play against. Oh my days, that line is going to absolutely destroy whoever is set out in front of them. You do give up a lot. You give up Lundell, you give up Knight, you give up essentially 2 first round picks, but you get so much back. Florida just going all in and bringing in Brad Marchand, who is going to fit into the system like a glove. This is an A+ through and through. Now, next up, we have the Los Angeles Kings. Now, the Kings pick up Andrei Kuzmenko and a 7th round pick from Philadelphia for a 3rd round pick. Now, I gave the Kings a C because I just expected them to do more. I mean, they haven't been playing great as of late, but you're probably going to go up against one of Vegas or Edmonton in the first round, and your solution to your problems is Andrei Kuzmenko, who hasn't been lighting it up since he had that breakout season in Vancouver, his first season in the NHL. It's just been downhill for Kuzmenko. And you give up a 3rd round pick, which is a pretty considerable asset. So yeah, that's why I'm giving the Los Angeles Kings a C. Next up, we have the Minnesota Wild. Now, Minnesota brings in Justin Brazeau, Gus Nyquist, and they send out, because I can't pronounce his name, Merritt. They send out Merritt and Jacob Lauko. Luke, I can't spell his name either. They send out Merritt and Jacob. All right, Merritt and Jacob go out the door, along with a 2nd round pick and a 6th round pick that belongs to the Boston Bruins, and they get Justin Brazeau and Gustav Nyquist. I gave this a B- because I think Minnesota is lacking in goal scoring, especially with Kaprizov out. But you look at the other teams in the Central Division. I mean, Dallas got better. Colorado got better. And you're going up against one of those two in the first round, and then more than likely the other one in the second round. And you bring in Brazeau and Nyquist. I just don't think it stacks up against those teams. But you also have to look at it from Minnesota just being smart, using some assets that they were willing to move to get in some guys who can help out now and potentially in the future, as well as they have a lot of cap space. So I think the Wild are going to be big players in the offseason this year, heading into the next year. So I kind of like it from the Wild, not going all in, but still buying at the deadline. But overall, I give them a B-. Next up, we have the Nashville Predators. They bring in Michael Bunting. They acquire a 2nd round pick that belongs to the Minnesota Wild, a 4th round pick that belongs to Pittsburgh, and a 5th round pick that belongs to Carolina. Going out the door is Thomas Novak, Luke Schenn, Gus Nyquist, and Mark Jankowski. Now, I gave them a C+ because they acquired Michael Bunting, which was just kind of random. I guess you needed to make the cap space work. But you only get a 2nd, a 4th, and a 5th for those players on the right. And I'm looking at them, I'm like, you could have at least got multiple 2nd round picks and a 3rd round pick and like another prospect. So I just don't think that they maximize their return, but they got some assets back for their unrestricted free agents this season. So moving into the future, you do get a 2nd round pick, a 4th, and a 5th. You can probably flip Michael Bunting to a contending team down the line, maybe at the draft or the offseason. So that's why I gave them a C+, and I couldn't really give them anything more. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils. Now, there's a lot going on here. They brought in a lot of players. They sent out a lot of assets, but none of them were really big name for me anyways. I mean, I'm a Canucks fan. I don't pay attention to New Jersey Devils hockey that much, right? But I gave them a B-. They bring in Brian Dumoulin, who I forgot to put is 50% retained. They bring in Cody Glass and Daniel Sprong, Dennis Cholowski. Like, they brought in some guys who can complement the core as is. it's kind of hard with the cap right now. I mean, Jack Hughes is on LTIR. I feel like they could have used that money better and maybe bought more. But they, again, you look at the players they sent out, you look at the draft picks they sent out. It was pretty safe from the New Jersey Devils, so that's why I give them a B minus. Oh boy, here we go. We have the New York Islanders. Now, right off the bat, A plus. The New York Islanders did fantastic at the deadline this year. They sent out Brock Nelson. They weren't going to re-sign him. Someone who I can compare to Brock Besser because Brock Besser means a lot to the city of Vancouver. Brock Nelson means a lot to the people of Brooklyn. And he's going 50% retained. You get a first round pick and Callum Ritchie. That's unbelievable business by Lou Lamoriello to get a first round pick and Callum Ritchie, who, again, like I said, is a top 30 prospect in the NHL. And it's just, I don't even know, man. There's unbelievable business by Lou Lamoriello. And again, why the heck did the Canucks not trade Brock Besser? If they're not going to re-sign him. If they re-signed him, that's a different, I'll get to it in Vancouver's. Next up, we have the New York Rangers. Now, the Rangers, again, played it pretty safe as well. They brought in Juuso Parssinen, Calvin DeHaan, Carson Soucy, Brendan Brisson, Nicolas Aube-Kubel, a second-round pick, and a fourth-round pick. So they did a mix of bringing in assets for the future as well as bringing in assets that can help right now, which is pretty good. Going out, Ryan Lindgren, 50% retained, Riley Smith, Hank Kemp, Jimmy Vesey, Eric Brandstrom, and a third-round pick that belongs to the San Jose Sharks. Again, I gave them a C+ because they didn't do really anything wrong here, and they also didn't really acquire too much to improve their team. So maybe you could have given them a B-, a B, but I'll give them a C+. It was pretty average, but pretty good overall from the New York Rangers. Next up, we have the Ottawa Senators. Now, the Ottawa Senators on the other side of the Buffalo trade with bringing in Dylan Cousins, getting rid of Josh Norris. Now, that's pretty big because, yes, Josh Norris wasn't really playing up to his contract. However, he's one of Brady Tkachuk's best friends, and that's your captain. That's the person you need to keep the most happy, and you traded him away. I don't know if any of you have seen the press conference that Brady Tkachuk had. It was more like an interview, in the locker room. I don't know if any of you have seen that, but man, he was absolutely emotional that Josh Norris was leaving the team. And you're bringing in Dylan Cousins, who can provide some offense, I guess, but I don't think it was worth making that trade to send out Josh Norris because of the impact it has on Brady Tkachuk. But the reason why the Ottawa Senators get a B overall is because they bring in Fabian Zetterlund from the San Jose Sharks. And you give up Zach Ospachuk, who is a pretty decent prospect, but again, he doesn't really help you right now. And you're trying to take that next step if you're the Ottawa Senators, and you get Fabian Zetterlund, which is absolutely fantastic. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, the Flyers brought in Nikita Grabenkin, Giovanni Smith, a 2027 first-round pick that belongs to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and a 2027 third-round pick that belongs to the Los Angeles Kings. They send out Scott Laughton at 50% retained. They send out Andrei Kuzmenko as well at 50% retained. Eric Johnson, a fourth-round pick, a sixth-round pick, and a seventh-round pick. Overall, I gave them a B+/A- because I feel like they could have gotten a little bit more out of Toronto for Scott Laughton. But at the same time, a first-round pick and a prospect is pretty damn good for a third-line center. So, if you want to give him an A-, sure. I'd probably still lean B+. But at the same time, I don't know, I'm still undecided. But yeah, B+/A- for the Philadelphia Flyers. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, they acquired a lot at the deadline this year. They get Tommy Novak, Chase Stillman, Max Graham, Connor Timmins, Connor Dewar, 2 second-round picks, a third-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and a fifth-round pick. Going out the door is Michael Bunting, who it didn't really work in Pittsburgh. They also send out Luke Schenn, Anthony Beauvillier, which was just a fantastic piece of work right there by Kyle Dubas, Vinny Desharnais, Cody Glass, and Jonathan Gruden, as well as a fourth-round pick from 2026 and a fifth-round pick from 2025. So yeah, I gave Pittsburgh an A-. Honestly, I'm looking at these rankings now. I should have gave the sellers a lot more credit because getting a second-round pick from Washington for Anthony Beauvillier probably is the steal of the trade deadline. Now watch Beauvillier go and score the Stanley Cup winning goal for Washington. But yeah, no, Pittsburgh knew they didn't really have much of a chance this season. I know Dubas wants to win with Sidney Crosby, but you have to look at the market, you have to be realistic, and he acquired Luke Shen and then flipped him for a second and I believe a fourth from Winnipeg. Like, that's just absolutely fantastic business again from Kyle Dubas, maximizing his return for guys he just acquired or guys he signed for free. So yeah, fantastic work by Kyle Dubas. I give him an A minus. If you want to give him an A or an A plus, go for it. Next up, we have the Seattle Kraken. Now, Seattle, pretty similarly to a lot of the other sellers, they realize they're not going to make the playoffs. They have valuable assets, and my goodness, did they freaking maximize their return. I'm looking at this trade now. I really liked it for Tampa Bay, but now looking at more for Seattle side, I mean, my goodness, that was a fantastic package for Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand. Now, today at the deadline, they also sent out Brandon Tanev and got a second round pick for him. And you look at the overall assets that Seattle got, you get Mikey Eyssimont, you get 2 first round picks, 2 second round picks. You do send out a lot of players who are useful to your roster right now. But again, you're not going to be good. You're not going to make the playoffs. You might as well sell high, and they got a lot of assets back for their guys. So yeah, Seattle gets an A plus for me. Next up, we have the San Jose Sharks. Now, everybody, stand and applaud. This is how you rebuild. Mike Grier is doing a fantastic job with the San Jose Sharks. Now, if you look at it in this scope, you're probably like, really, an A plus? Just hear me out. So they bring in Zach Ospachuk, who's a fantastic prospect. Noah Gregor, Patrick Giles, Vinny Desharnais. They take on some contracts. Carl Berglund. They get a first round pick from Edmonton, a second round pick that belongs to Ottawa, a fourth round pick that belongs to St. Louis, and a fourth round pick that belongs to Florida. Now, here's where it's like unbelievable. They send out Jake Walman. Jake Walman, a very good defenseman for the San Jose Sharks. He's been putting up a bunch of points this season. And you send him to Edmonton, you maximize the return, you get a first round pick back. You want to know what they got him for? They got him for nothing. The Detroit Red Wings sent Jake Walman to the San Jose Sharks for future considerations. And guess what the future behold for the San Jose Sharks? A first round pick from Edmonton. Like, that is absolutely fantastic work by Mike Grier to get a first round pick for basically nothing. They also send out Fabian Zetterlund, Luke Kunin, Nico Sturm, Vitek Vanacek, Tristan Robbins, a fourth, a fifth, and a seventh that all belong to them. But yeah, this is an A plus rebuild by the San Jose Sharks and an A plus trade deadline. So next up, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now you'll notice here I have the out and in swapped. I just kind of got a little bit lazy, to be honest, with Seattle, and I just swapped the in and out because that's essentially all that happened here. Tampa didn't make any other trade. They trade away Mikey Eyssimont, 2 first round picks, a second round pick, a fourth round pick to acquire Yanni Gourde at $1.29 million against the cap. They take the full cap of Oliver Bjorkstrand, Kyle O'Coin, and a 5th round pick. Tampa acquired Gourde and Bjorkstrand. That's all that really matters here. I give them a B plus because at the time this looked like a fantastic trade, but as the deadline went, you're looking at what other guys went for, and I think Tampa probably could have done a little bit better, giving up 2 first round picks. But nonetheless, you look at the Tampa Bay roster, Yanni Gourde is going to fit in like a glove. He's been there before. Oliver Bjorkstrand, again, is going to provide you with goal scoring. This is still a very good trade for the Tampa Bay Lightning as they try to win another Stanley Cup. Next up, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, the Leafs were looking pretty... it wasn't looking good for Toronto, I'm not going to lie. Because the whole day they did a whole lot of nothing, and you're seeing Boston make trades, Florida make trades. Like, it was not looking good for Toronto. We don't know if how close they were to getting Braden Shen for their third line. But I was of the opinion, like, yes, you have a third line center need, but this blue line does not stack up with Florida or Tampa. It just doesn't right now. But Toronto solved both of those needs today at the deadline. They acquire Scott Laughton, 50% retained. They acquire Brandon Carlo, 15% retained. They get a 5th round pick and a 6th round pick as well. Now, important to note, Scott Laughton and Brandon Carlo both have another year on their contract. So these are not rental players. They are going to be on the Maple Leafs roster next season, barring any crazy trades. But what did they have to give up? They had to give up Fraser Minton, Connor Dewar, Connor Timmins, Nikita Grabenkin, 2 first-round picks, and a 4th-round pick. Now, yes, it is a lot. However, if you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs historically, they don't like to move on from a lot of their prospects and their picks. So I'm actually pretty surprised that they gave up this much so late in the deadline. But they give up Fraser Minten, which I know Toronto Maple Leafs fans love him. They think that he was the future, center, and then Tavares can go to the wing. But you do get Scott Laughton in return. Overall, it's worth it. I think Minten is at best a 3rd-line center. So you want to accelerate that process now because, of course, you have Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Riley, Tavares. You want to win a Stanley Cup now, and you can't really wait for Fraser Minten to develop into the 3rd-line center that you need. So yeah, that's why you ship him out. Nikita Grabenkin, he played a cup of coffee with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He didn't really do too much other than forecheck really hard. But yeah, that's just a prospect you're sending out the door. Dewar and Timmins, again, just kind of contracts you're sending out to make the money work. You're bringing in Brandon Carlo. Now, this one kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think anybody had Brandon Carlo even being traded at this year's deadline, let alone being traded to a divisional rival in the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the main thing for Toronto is that Brandon Carlo shoots right. That's been such a need for so long now. They pick up Chris Tanev in the offseason. You pick up OEL, but he shoots left and he can play right. And you have Jake McCabe, same thing. He shoots left but can play right. But you don't have an actual right shot defenseman to add to your top 4. And now the Maple Leafs do have that. Now, I don't think that this puts them over the top with the likes of the Florida Panthers, for example. I think they have a better defensive core. But now you look at Toronto and you say you have Morgan Riley, Chris Tanev, Brandon Carlo. That means that one of Jake McCabe or OEL moves down to the bottom pair, and then, whoever's left at that point, right? Philippe Myers or whatever. This trade was actually very, very good for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think it does give them a little bit of edge as well, which is what they need. Yeah, overall, I mean, you get the 3rd-line center, you get a right shot defenseman. I gave them an A-. I think because of Scott Laughton. I think if he was Braden Shen, I'd probably give them an A or A+. But Scott Laughton, nonetheless, is going to help this Leafs team in the playoffs. Next up, we have the Utah Hockey Club. Now, I don't really know what to give them grade-wise. Do I give them a B because they got rid of Shea Weber's contract? Or do I give them a C because they got a 5th-round pick back from Chicago? So I don't really know what to make of this trade, but yeah, they cleared up some cap space, I guess. Oh, boys, it's about to go down. All right, we have the Vancouver Canucks. Overall grade, F. Absolutely an F for the Vancouver Canucks. You guys, oh my goodness, where do I even start? Let's start with Brock Boeser. Brock Boeser is a fantastic player, and he is beloved from Vancouver fans up and down, Main Street or whatever, right? Anywhere you go, anybody who supports the Vancouver Canucks loves Brock Boeser. He scored 40 goals last year. He's on pace to get 25 this year. But oh my goodness, look at all the things, all the trades that happened today. Beauvillier for a 2nd-round pick. Brock Nelson for a 1st and Callum Ritchie. Kuzmenko for a 3rd-round pick. Luke Shen for a 2nd-round pick. And the Vancouver Canucks. You want to tell me Patrick Allvin said, yeah, we just didn't like the offers for Brock Boeser. And if I told you one of these offers, you'd run out the building. Brother, so what? You're telling me that getting nothing and not re-signing the guy is better than whatever he got offered? He's making it sound like he got offered a 7th-round pick. But I guarantee you it was multiple seconds, prospects involved. I would much rather that than lose him for nothing. Minnesota has a boatload of cap space. If he hits July 1st, he's not signed as a Vancouver Canuck player. He's going to Minnesota. He's from Minnesota. He'll get paid. Next, we have Pius Suter. Pius Suter, who's having a fantastic season for the Vancouver Canucks, a very good utility player, can play the left wing, can play center, can penalty kill, can even play on your power play if you need to. He's been scoring, but oh my goodness, you're telling me you couldn't get a 2nd-round pick back for him? Washington gave up a 2nd-round pick for Beauvillier. I guarantee you, Washington would take that 2nd-round pick back and give it to you instead of the Pittsburgh Penguins for Pius Suter. But no, you don't trade him. And guess what? No extension. Still, I mean, I haven't checked Twitter recently, but no extension for Pius Suter either. This is completely unacceptable. Now, why is this unacceptable? Because the Canucks They could make the playoffs. They very much still could make the playoffs because of Kevin Lankinen and Quinn Hughes. Those two can single-handedly make the Canucks make the playoffs this season. I understand that. But what are they going to do? They're going to lose in 4 or 5 games to whoever wins the division or whoever wins the conference, whoever they face up in the first round. Okay, let's say you somehow get the 3rd divisional spot. Wow, what a comeback from the Vancouver Canucks. Guess what your reward is? You're going up against either Vegas or Edmonton. That's ending in 4 games. Hate to break it to you. Now, okay, let's say that they finish in a wildcard spot. Guess what? You're going up against either Winnipeg, Dallas, Colorado, and then you include Edmonton or Vegas. Those all end in 4 games. So yes, that's why overall I give the Canucks an F. The only F on this list. I mean, there's teams who didn't even make a trade today. The Montreal Canadiens, I give you a D minus because you didn't make a trade. The Canucks, I'm giving them an F. So yeah, overall I give the Canucks an F, even though with the Carson Soucy trade you get a very, very high 3rd round pick. So you can almost consider it as a 2nd round pick. So yeah, I do give that one a B+, but overall an F. F for Vancouver. Next up, we have the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, I gave them a C+ because they get Riley Smith, who is someone they're familiar with, but you give up a former 1st round pick in Brendan Brisson, and you give up the 3rd round pick that was just mentioned in the last slide. You look at Edmonton, who added a lot. You look at Colorado, you look at Dallas. I mean, everybody added a lot. I know Vegas already has a very strong team, and you add Riley Smith to that. That's why I gave him a C+ and not anything lower. But again, you can't give them anything higher than that. Next up, we have the Washington Capitals. Now, okay, I will say, Anthony Beauvillier for a 2nd round pick is absolutely crazy to me. Like, that in itself, you can argue as an F. But I give the Washington Capitals a D because this is something that I saw last year with the Canucks that the Capitals this year aren't doing, actually. So the Capitals, they're one of the best teams in the East. Arguably, I think maybe they're 1st in the NHL right now as it stands. They're one of the best teams in the NHL. And you only give up a 2nd round pick from this year, which you know is going to be low. And you get Anthony Beauvillier back. Yes, the return is not great. But you don't commit anything crazy. 1st round picks, prospects, more 2nd round picks. They didn't commit anything crazy to this core who they know pretty well like what they're going to do moving forward. However, there is a bit of unpredictability there because of like what's happening with Vancouver this season, for example. Imagine if the Capitals gave up a protected pick this year or a conditional pick this year that slid to next year, and then they end up like Vancouver. That is worst case scenario for the Capitals. So from that perspective alone of just being smart with your assets, it bumped it up from like an F to a D for me. But still, Beauvillier for a 2nd is an absolute crime. Next up, we have the Winnipeg Jets. Now they add Brandon Tanev back. They get Luke Schenn. They get Chris Driedger. They send out Kaapo Kähkönen. They send out 2 2nd round picks and a 4th. So they send a 2nd round pick for Luke Schenn and a 2nd round pick for Brandon Tanev. Honestly, you look at the value there, I feel like you should have got, but not that you should have got more. I think they should have pursued more, actually. If you're willing to give up 2 seconds for Luke Schenn and Brandon Tanev, I think they should have aimed higher realistically. So that's why my rating for them or my grade for them was pretty low, but it does address some needs of them and it provides them depth. Okay, so that is it. We are done. The Winnipeg Jets was the last team. Let me know what you thought of my grades. I don't want any hate. Just, we can have a conversation. If you disagree with me, tell me why. Like, what was wrong with my reasoning, my rationale? Or if you think I was being too harsh on a team, again, tell me your reasoning, tell me your rationale. Anyways, that is it for this video. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more.